You'll never compare to my work husband. That's the sentence. That's the one she let slip, loud enough to slice through the rooftop chatter, the clink of wine glasses, the nervous laughter of people pretending their careers didn't hang on a few men in corner offices. A sentence sharpened not just for me, but for the audience. She wanted the sting to echo off the string lights and glass railings, to let every one of her colleagues know that the man who shared her bed was apparently some pathetic understudy in her comedy routine. And the worst part? They laughed. All of them. The kind of laugh that's half pity, half agreement. The kind that makes your chest burn while your face stays still. I didn't give her the show she wanted. I looked at her for one long, quiet second. Long enough for her wine-flushed smile to falter, for her friend on the left to stop mid-chuckle. Then I tilted my head, gave her a nod, and let it out, calm and deliberate, almost conversational. Congratulations. The papers are signed, and your boss is about to regret everything. Silence rolled in like a storm cloud. She blinked, confused. A couple people forced awkward giggles, thinking it was a joke, but the chill in my voice didn't invite laughter. I set my glass down, turned, and walked straight out. No dramatic exit, no shouting match. Just gone. The echo of my shoes on the rooftop stairs was the only punctuation I allowed. She tried to wave it off, tossing her hair, rolling her eyes like it was some petty spat, a little marital banter in public. Oh, he's just dramatic, she told the table, and her friends, still tipsy, nodded. But one woman, a junior analyst, sharp-eyed, the kind who actually reads the fine print, didn't laugh. She pressed her lips together and looked down at her drink. She knew that tone. She knew it wasn't bluster. And here's where I'll step out of the story for just 1 second, because more than 90% of people listening to this don't subscribe, even though it takes a second, and honestly, that little click motivates the team to keep digging deeper, writing sharper, and pulling no punches. If you like where this is going, hit that subscribe button. It keeps the fire lit. Back on the rooftop, my wife kept playing the part. She laughed louder, trying to cover the quiet unease. But unease has a way of spreading. It rippled across the table, into the silence of those who weren't sure if I was bluffing or if something heavier was about to land. Because the thing about humiliation in public is this: the louder the laughter, the more fragile the mask. She didn't notice her work husband himself stiffen, his smile flicker for a second. He wasn't laughing. Not really. I took the elevator down, stepped out onto the street, and let the night air cut through me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it. I didn't need to. The papers were already filed. The signatures already dry. The storm already moving. She thought I'd swallow it, let it rot me from the inside, maybe drag us into another round of screaming matches that went nowhere. She thought wrong. I'd learned long ago that rage is noisy, and noise gets ignored. Silence terrifies people more. Silence with a smile? That's a knife slid between the ribs. She just handed me the perfect stage. And she didn't even realize the curtains were about to fall on more than just our marriage. Because while she drank cheap rooftop Chardonnay and called another man her real partner, I'd already made sure her entire world, her boss, her golden promotion, her shiny little clique, was standing on a trap door. And she just yanked the lever herself. She stumbled in, heels clicking against the hardwood like punctuation marks in a sentence she hadn't finished writing. Still half laughing from the cab ride home, still drunk on her own performance. The rooftop lights, the smug smiles from her coworkers, the way her work husband leaned in with that stupid little toast to partnerships that matter. Yeah, she was riding high, expecting, at worst, a sulk, maybe a passive-aggressive look from me. At best, she thought I'd be asleep and she could brush it all under the rug by morning. But the house was too still, too clean. The lights were dimmed. Her favorite playlist wasn't humming from the kitchen speaker. No clinking dishes, no smell of leftovers warming in the oven. The air had that uncanny hotel feel, lived in but empty. She walked down the hallway, already dialing up a sigh for the confrontation she assumed was coming. The closet door was ajar. She glanced inside. My side, shirts, suits, the hiking boots she always pretended to hate, was gone. Nothing. Not a hanger left swinging. Her stomach did a small, reluctant twist. In the kitchen, the table was set like a scene from a crime drama. One envelope. Thick. No post-it note. No dramatics. Just our names printed on the front. And beneath it, a familiar document with her signature halfway down the page, her own handwriting from 2 years ago, proudly looping over her new title at the company. Director of Strategic Accounts. The clause was highlighted, Section 7, be stakeholder conduct and reputational risk protocols. She scoffed. almost laughed. He's bluffing, she muttered aloud, tossing her purse on the counter like she still lived in a world where that mattered. Then she checked her phone. One missed call. Halvorsen, her boss. She didn't call back. Because she wasn't worried. Not yet. She thought this was all part of my little tantrum, me lashing out because I couldn't handle a joke. She forgot who drafted that clause, who wrote half the templates her company still used, who proofed every contract in bed while she bragged about how sharp her team was. Instead of panic, she poured a glass of wine, sat at the island, flipped open the folder, thumbing through the divorce documents like it was a game of chicken she assumed I'd back out of. The details were thorough, cold, no fluff, just numbers, signatures, dates. The date at the top? Today. She leaned back, wine swirling. The arrogance was still there, just a hairline crack showing. Maybe I'd gone to a hotel. Maybe I was waiting for her to crawl into bed and apologize. She had no idea. No idea that while she'd been sipping wine under string lights and joking about never comparing, I was in a silent meeting room 3 blocks away, sliding that very clause across a polished table to a man with an 8-figure acquisition riding on investor confidence. He read the highlighted section once, looked up at me, and said only, "You sure?" I was. Upstairs in our old bedroom, she kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the bed, her side. Still texting her coworkers, still screenshotting comments from the party. She typed, "He's being dramatic again. Probably just sleeping at the condo." But at that moment, her boss was in his office with a legal packet he didn't know existed until 30 minutes ago. He was holding a printed photo from the rooftop party, her wine in the air, mid-laugh, captioned with her exact quote. He didn't sleep that night. She did. Because the fall hadn't started yet. Not for her. Not until the morning, when she'd wake up and finally check the notifications. When she'd see the message that changed her posture. When she'd hear the fear in her boss's voice and realize too late, this wasn't a tantrum. This was the consequence she wrote into existence. The first vibration barely registered. 6:12 a.m. She groaned, slapped the phone off the nightstand, and buried her face deeper into the pillow, still crusted with last night's makeup. She hadn't even dreamed. Just sank into that reckless kind of sleep that comes after too much wine and way too much pride. The second buzz came 30 seconds later. Same number, Halvorsen, her boss. She blinked at the screen, confused. Why was he calling at? Then it buzzed again. And again. Different numbers now. Office line. Internal cell. Unknown. By 6:45, the screen was a scroll of red. 12 missed calls. By 7 o'clock, it was 26. She sat up, squinting into the morning light cutting through the blinds, heart still dulled by hangover fog, but unease finally starting to creep in. She pulled her robe tighter, shuffled to the kitchen, phone in hand, and stared at the counter, at the folder from last night, still unopened beyond the first few pages. She hadn't touched the clause again. Hadn't needed to, she thought. It was all overblown. Until 8 a.m. Her work husband texted her directly. "What the hell did you do?" No greeting. No smiley. No smug inside joke. Just raw panic. She froze. He never texted like that. Not even when he'd lost a major client last fall. Her thumbs hovered, unsure whether to respond. When another call came in, Halvorsen again. This time, she answered. "Hello. You didn't tell me he was a co-owner." That stopped her mid-step. "What?" Her boss's voice was flat. But behind it, something sharp. Terrified. "You didn't tell me. You didn't warn me. Do you have any idea what you've done?" She swallowed, the air suddenly heavier. "He's not a co-owner. He's just my husband. He's not involved in the business." Silence on the other end. Then a low, broken exhale. "No, he was silent. But he's in the papers. We checked. He came through a holding group, 3 levels deep, but it leads to a trust. Your trust. Your name is on a shared document from the original capital agreement. And the clause, he filed a trigger." She blinked. "He did what?" "We're exposed. Badly. The investors have it. The photos. The quotes. All of it. Someone. He sent them a packet this morning. With timestamps." She staggered back, leaning on the fridge. Her hands were cold. "That's not possible. He wouldn't. He doesn't even." "Stop talking." Halvorsen's voice cracked. "This isn't about your marriage anymore. This is corporate liability. And you're a direct associate on the clause. We are already getting calls." She stood there, robe gaping slightly, her reflection in the microwave door suddenly alien. Hair wild. Skin pale. "Do not come to the office today," Halvorsen added. "We're trying to figure out if we can quarantine the damage. But the deal's off. It's gone." The acquisition team walked before 7:30. She heard herself whisper, "No, this can't be real." But it was. In the background of the call, she heard another voice. A woman, legal, maybe, murmuring about risk review and ethics clause breach. Then the line went dead. She stared at the screen, which had switched to her wallpaper. A photo from 3 months ago, her and her work husband at a client retreat. Matching lanyards. Her head tilted toward him. Her actual husband, the one who quietly read every clause, who signed the early capital checks, who sat through those dead-eyed dinners with her partners, was nowhere in the frame. She hadn't just betrayed him. She'd underestimated him. And now, everything she'd built, every smug smile, every whispered insult, every glass of wine raised in faux superiority, was cracking at the foundation. She thought she could humiliate him publicly and suffer nothing privately. Instead, the whole boardroom was bleeding. Back when the company was still operating out of a co-working space and Halvorsen was pitching from hotel lobbies, they'd hit a funding wall. Big ideas, small wallets. They needed bridge capital, fast. The kind of money that doesn't just patch holes, but lets you walk into rooms where the glass doors stay shut, unless your net worth starts with a 7. She remembered those months. The panic. The strategic brainstorming sessions that were really just desperation dinners. She was still just an account manager then, doing grunt work and kissing teeth. Meanwhile, her husband, me, watched from the sidelines. Silent. Not because I didn't care. Because I was calculating. Watching Halvorsen burn contacts and burnouts alike. Watching them run lean and loud with zero legal infrastructure. I knew exactly what they were missing. So I offered capital. Not directly, of course. That would have been too easy to trace, too obvious to misuse. I structured it through a limited trust, nested inside a corporate vehicle that looked like a boutique capital partner out of Delaware. I let Halvorsen believe he'd pulled off a miracle, attracting silent funding without strings. There were strings. The paperwork was dense. Tucked inside the partnership equity agreement was a clause, a quiet little paragraph dressed in legalese, Section 14B, stakeholder conduct and reputational integrity. It read simple enough. In the event that any stakeholder or their direct associate becomes the source of reputational risk that materially threatens investor confidence, the original capital provider reserves the right to trigger an internal review and pause capital flow, pending remediation. That clause had my fingerprints all over it. And 2 years later, when my wife got her shiny promotion, she was handed a stack of onboarding documents. Among them, the amended charter that included that same clause. Her name, signature, and timestamp went right on it. No red lines. No questions. I didn't gloat. Didn't even smirk when she brought home the champagne. I congratulated her. Told her she earned it. And then filed the copy away with the others. She had no idea she'd signed her own guillotine. So when she looked at the printed clause on our kitchen table the morning after her rooftop humiliation, highlighted, underlined, her signature boxed in pen, she saw it for the first time. Not just the words. The weight. It wasn't just divorce anymore. It was breach of trust. Not marital, corporate. She wasn't just my wife. She was now a direct associate of a stakeholder whose conduct triggered investor flight. And in the cold-blooded world of private capital, perception is poison. When Halvorsen got that clause packet at 5:04 a.m., with attached media, her quote, her photos, the timestamp from the rooftop cam footage, it wasn't just HR material. It was a grenade. The investment team read it. Paused all disbursements. Canceled Thursday's meeting. Because suddenly, the board wasn't dealing with a flaky employee who drank too much and called her husband names in public. They were dealing with a compliance breach. A reputational exposure. And the man she'd mocked in front of her entire department? He had full legal standing to demand a halt in funding, a forensic review, and a removal of voting rights from any internal party under scrutiny. She was both a direct associate and the cause of reputational damage. In short, she'd become the exact type of risk the clause was designed to neutralize. And worse, it wasn't spite. It wasn't emotional. It was structural, built into the foundation she never bothered to examine. For years, she thought the man in bed next to her was just along for the ride. Turns out, he wrote the road. At 9:17 a.m. sharp, 3 inboxes lit up. Not a second before. I timed the release to the minute. Precision mattered more than impact. Investors don't respond to drama. They respond to documentation. The subject line alone was enough to turn stomachs inside boardrooms across 2 time zones. Compliance clause triggered, reputational breach filed. It didn't go to interns, or assistants, or risk managers. It went to the managing partners themselves. The people who'd personally shaken Halvorsen's hand over breakfast, smiled through their teeth, and promised funding rounds contingent on a clean Q3 acquisition. Inside the email, the clause, pulled directly from their own contracts. Highlighted. Interpreted. Signed by the compliance attorney I'd pre-retained months ago, just in case. And then came the attachments. Photo number 1. My wife, wine in hand, mid-laugh, surrounded by junior staffers, smug and unaware of the rooftop cam hidden behind the HVAC duct. Photo number 2. Her leaning into her work husband, clearly off-duty but still wearing her company badge. Audio snippet. A few seconds, crystal clear. You'll never compare to my work husband. And under that, a paragraph of context, sourced from the firm's own social media page, tagging her role, her client portfolio, her recent visibility in industry interviews. The quote and the images weren't just embarrassing. They were reputational acid poured directly onto the brand they'd been trying to clean up for 2 fiscal years. By 10:03 a.m., the first response came back. One sentence, requesting immediate pause on all capital transfers pending legal review. By 10:28, 2 more firms echoed the same. By 11:12, the firm's acquisition deal, which had taken 6 months of back-channeling and ego-stroking, collapsed. The acquiring team cited unanticipated reputational liability and instability in executive stakeholder vetting. In short, we don't buy ticking bombs. Back at her place, my soon-to-be ex-wife's phone was having a seizure. Calls stacked like falling bricks. Notifications rolling across her screen so fast she couldn't read them. She paced the living room barefoot, answering none, hoping it would die down. Then, at 11:56 a.m., her phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize. Out of frustration or instinct, she picked up. Hello. The voice was calm. Male. Older. Controlled in the way only billionaires and bomb disposal experts speak. Do you have any idea who your husband is? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. He didn't wait. You think this is about marriage? You think this is about feelings? Your husband isn't just in the paperwork. He wrote it. His name isn't on the letterhead, but his trust controls 22% of this firm. You embarrassed a shadow stakeholder. And you did it on camera. She whispered, I didn't know. No, you didn't read. That's worse. Click. No goodbye. No curse. Just a click. She dropped the phone. Literally. It clattered across the floor like a confession. In that moment, guilt finally slipped through the cracks of panic. Because now, it wasn't just about her. Not her ego, her reputation, or her stupid flirtation with a man whose main skill was copying her pitch decks. This was real money. Real power. People with security teams and offshore interests. People who erase names, not just reputations. And she had made a public enemy out of one of them. What she didn't realize was how many people already knew. At that moment, Halvorsen was sweating through his second shirt of the day, trying to reassure a board that no longer answered his calls. The acquisition lawyer had already scheduled a protective clause review with outside counsel. And the compliance firm, mine, was finalizing a timeline of her involvement with internal documents tagged to her logins, Slack messages, and metadata. All of it building towards something bigger. Not personal revenge. Financial annihilation. Because once the investors pull their money, the board doesn't ask questions. They pull the people who caused it. And she had just lit her own seat on fire. They called her in at 2:14 p.m. No hi. No pleasantries. No, can you step into the conference room? Just a calendar invite labeled HR, immediate compliance review. She walked into the office with sunglasses still on, hoping the glass would hide the bloodshot panic in her eyes. It didn't, and no one tried to pretend otherwise. No one made eye contact. Even the receptionist, usually syrupy polite, didn't offer a smile, just handed her a visitor badge. Not her usual swipe card. A visitor badge. She passed her own desk on the way down the hallway and saw the screen black, the power cord unplugged, her nameplate quietly missing. The silence was thick. The kind of corporate silence where everyone's heard the news, but no one wants to be the one caught talking about it. She entered the HR room expecting some kind of explanation, or maybe a chance to explain herself. What she got instead was a single sheet of paper slid across the table by a woman she didn't recognize. Temporary administrative leave, pending compliance audit. No name on the letterhead, just the firm logo and a blank for her signature. She blinked. Wait, what? No one even asked me for my side of this. Halvorsen was there, but seated far from her, eyes sunken, his suit wrinkled like he'd been sleeping in it. He didn't speak, just rubbed his temple. I don't understand, she stammered. This is over one stupid sentence at a party. The HR woman looked up from her tablet, expression flat. This is about documented conduct unbecoming a corporate officer, and your proximity to an internal capital stakeholder who has filed a compliance breach. I can fix this, she said too loud. I'll apologize. I'll talk to him. He's angry, he's acting out. I can calm him down. Halvorsen finally looked up. His voice was thin, tired. You don't get it. He's not throwing a tantrum. He wrote the clause. The board isn't panicking because of a quote. They're panicking because he's exercised something we all signed, including you. She sat down slowly. The HR rep pushed the pen closer. You don't have to sign this. But if you don't, the board will initiate immediate suspension with cause. Your choice. Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen. She didn't even finish reading the second paragraph. Just scrawled her name and let it slide back across the table. It was over before she could catch her breath. No debrief. No questions. No offers of help. On the way out, she noticed her work husband's desk was already cleared. A sticky note where his keyboard used to be, relocated. No email. No text. The same guy who used to message her during meetings with inside jokes and late-night memes didn't even send a GIF goodbye. She tried to call him, straight to voicemail. The group chat? Deleted. She wasn't in it anymore. Even the interns didn't look her way. By 3:30 p.m., her building access was revoked. By 4 p.m., the corporate WhatsApp she'd been an admin in gone. No alert. Just gone. Her silence grew heavier by the minute. Not one person checked in. Not one friend reached out to say, that was rough. Because everyone knew. Everyone had seen the email, the clause, the photo, and everyone understood what she still didn't want to admit. You don't get to casually humiliate a silent investor in front of his own capital. And you definitely don't get to stay when that investor has receipts, legal standing, and no intention of forgiving quietly. She walked out of the building alone, the visitor badge still pinned to her chest like a scarlet letter. No goodbye, not even from the assistants. She wasn't just being punished. She was being erased. The emergency board session was set for 5 p.m. sharp, the kind that skips catered lunches and opens with sealed folders, not smiles. Everyone showed up early, everyone except him. He didn't need to be there. Not physically. Not anymore. At 4:57 p.m., an assistant wheeled in a plain manila envelope and handed it to the chairman. No elaborate binder, no slideshow. Just a one-page memo printed on heavy, cream-colored stock. The header, Keller and Drayson, LLP, a name that made one board member audibly mutter, "Oh, F." The memo was brief. My client has chosen to enforce full rights under the stakeholder clause. As outlined, this includes immediate halt of all equity transfers, appointment of an external forensic auditor, and withholding of signature for Series C approval until the board conducts a reputational integrity review. Signed, Daniel Westerman, ESQ. That signature alone sent a ripple down the table. Westerman didn't handle tantrums. He handled billion-dollar clawbacks and regulatory ice baths. When his name was on a memo, someone was about to lose a yacht. She wasn't in the room. She wasn't even in the building anymore. She was in her car, parked outside the law firm she couldn't afford, sobbing silently with the visor mirror half open and the email still unread. The CFO called her directly. His voice cracked before he even said hello. I warned him, he said. I told him not to make it personal. She swallowed hard. Who? Halvorsen? No. Your husband. She didn't say anything. I told him not to humiliate you. I told him, privately, weeks ago, that his jokes were getting out of hand. That it looked bad. That it was unprofessional. He paused, then whispered. He said it was personal. Another pause. Longer. And now it's professional. Her breath hitched. What does that mean? It means we're being audited. Externally. No one gets to sign off on the next funding round until it's complete, which could take months. Can't they just approve the transfer without him? No, he said. Because he didn't just write the clause. He holds veto rights on equity events triggered by reputational breach. She gripped the steering wheel. But he's a ghost. He never even spoke at meetings. That's the point, the CFO said, almost reverent. He never needed to. That's why none of us realized how dangerous he was until now. She looked up, eyes blurry, as a man in a suit walked past her car window, clipboard in hand, legal pad under one arm, heading into the very building where that memo had detonated. She wasn't just locked out of her job. She had jammed the gears of a machine she didn't understand. And the people inside, people she used to drink with, joke with, manage on Slack, were now in closed-door sessions wondering how they'd missed the landmine she stepped on. In the lobby of that boardroom building, a secretary opened a sealed folder and whispered, He filed this months ago. Just never hit send. Meanwhile, 300 miles away, he sat across from another table, sipping coffee in a different city, with different lawyers, discussing asset reallocation, new ventures, and quiet exits. He hadn't called her, hadn't answered her texts. He didn't gloat. He simply removed himself from the table, then lit it on fire from the outside. And now the board wasn't trying to fix the fallout. They were trying to survive it. Her attorney arrived with a too confident smile and a worn leather briefcase he probably thought made him look seasoned, not desperate. She'd hired him on the advice of a friend, someone who swore he was tactical and cutthroat. He wore a three-piece suit, gray pinstripe, and tapped his pen theatrically during the first 5 minutes of the meeting, like he was already planning a courtroom monologue. He told her not to worry, that men who act out emotionally in business always overplay their hand in court. Then he opened the envelope, and the tapping stopped. Across the conference table, my attorney, calm, unflinching, the kind of woman whose handshake is colder than ice and twice as clean, had already arranged the folders by date. Not alphabetically, chronologically. Every asset, every clause, every account movement. 2 weeks ago, we'd already triggered the arbitration clause embedded in our prenup, the one her lawyer hadn't even noticed until that moment. It had been tied not to fidelity, not to income, but to conduct clauses inside any company where we both had financial overlap. It wasn't a trap. It was a gate. She walked into it all by herself. Her lawyer began mumbling legalese, trying to find some loophole, but it was like watching a man drown in a fountain, dramatic, pointless, and deeply embarrassing. "The house," she said suddenly, trying to cut through the tension. "It's in both our names." My attorney didn't even flinch. The title was refinanced 3 months ago. Funds for the refinance came from the trust, and you signed the authorization while accepting capital for the new deck. That makes the trust the final contributor. The title shifted. The house is his. She blinked. But what about the joint account? Frozen. Split via arbitration. He has 62%. You have 38. Based on what? My lawyer slid a packet across the table. Inside, screenshots, logs, expense trails, calendar overlaps between her corporate card and, let's just say, non-corporate venues. She looked at her own attorney, who was now reading paragraph 7 of the prenup with a kind of defeated reverence, like a priest at the wrong funeral. "The car?" she asked quietly. "Can I at least keep my car?" My attorney didn't even pretend to consider it, just offered a soft, professional smile. "You'll need to lease a new one. That vehicle was registered through the business partnership. It's assigned to the trust." Her voice cracked. "You're joking." "No," she replied. "You just never checked the title." It hit her then, not with a scream, not with a sob, but with the sound of a chair creaking as she leaned back, staring at the ceiling like it might hold answers the lawyers didn't. She thought she was fighting a marriage. She was actually negotiating with a contract. A contract she never read. Her lawyer tried to recover, throwing around phrases like negotiation phase and pending asset review, but we all knew it was theater. She had walked into the meeting thinking she could buy herself leverage with charm, or guilt, or just old memories. But memory isn't admissible. Paperwork is. She signed it all. The promotion, the equity clause, the conduct agreement, the silent capital share, the refinance. Every page had her initials. She hadn't married a man. She'd married a system. And the system had just repossessed her lifestyle. She came back on a Wednesday. Technically, it wasn't a return, just completion of leave paperwork, as the email phrased it. But she showed up in full war paint anyway, high heels echoing down the hallway like nothing had changed. Like she could still bluff her way through this. Except everything had changed. The elevator didn't stop on the executive floor. Her badge had been restricted. She had to take the stairs the rest of the way. When she got to her old office, the glass door bore a different name. A younger woman's name. Someone who used to bring her coffee, now apparently bringing it for someone else. Her desk? Cleared. Not even a pen left behind. Security had boxed her personal items into a dull brown banker's box with her name written in Sharpie. Half her first name smudged off like someone had started writing it and stopped caring halfway through. The HR coordinator met her near the supply closet and handed her a laminated badge, temporary access only. "Your new desk is over here," she said, leading her toward the bullpen. She was placed in a shared cubicle. Open seating. No privacy. No view. Just 4 gray walls and a chair that wobbled slightly when she sat. People passed her without stopping. No greetings. No nods. No one even acknowledged she was back. The woman she used to gossip with by the vending machine wouldn't even meet her eyes. The junior analyst who once begged her for mentorship walked past without blinking, headphones in. She pulled out her phone, desperate for a text. Nothing. The group chats were silent, or worse, active without her. By noon, her inbox was nearly empty. The invites had dried up. The pitch decks she used to be CC'd on were being sent without her. She asked the project lead why. He mumbled something about restructuring workflows and reallocating deliverables. Corporate speak for, you don't matter anymore. She tried to book a conference room. Access denied. She tried to pitch an idea. No response. She tried to set a meeting with Halvorsen. Calendar blocked. She was ghosted, professionally. But the whispers didn't stop. She heard them in the hallways, just outside reach. Soft, sharp fragments. Claw's girl. Investor's wife. Well, ex. Don't get too close. Might trigger compliance. Once, in the break room, a senior partner said it out loud. To another associate. She messed with the wrong man. No one crosses a silent investor and walks away clean. She stepped into the room just in time to hear it. They didn't even flinch. Didn't apologize. Just took their coffee and walked out, like she was furniture. She tried to defend herself once, cornered an old ally by the printer, and said, "You know me. You know I'm not some liability." This was personal, not business. But the woman just raised a hand. It's all business now. That was the last time she tried to explain herself. Her emails started going unanswered. Her access to internal files began to flicker in and out. Then her parking spot was reassigned. Then her company card was temporarily suspended for audit. Then she got a message from IT. We're streamlining digital permissions. Please back up your drive. She wasn't fired. Not yet. But she wasn't working either. She was just there. A ghost with a badge. And what made it worse, what made her stomach twist every morning, was knowing that the one person who could have stopped it all, who could have made one phone call and reversed the damage, wasn't even thinking about her anymore. He wasn't calling. He wasn't threatening. He was just gone. And the silence he left behind was louder than any revenge she could have imagined. Her phone exploded at 3:42 a.m. Not with a sound. Her ringer had been off for weeks, but with a seizure of vibrations so aggressive it clattered off the nightstand and hit the floor with a thud. 128 missed calls. Her boss, the head of legal, 2 numbers tied to investor relations, and one from a New York area code she didn't recognize, but knew instinctively was bad news. She blinked hard in the dark, heart pounding, breath shallow. Her eyes burned from sleep, or the lack of it. The last few days had been a blur. A hallway of shut doors. A slow crawl of relevancy slipping out from under her like wet cement. She tried to rally. Tried to find another angle, another redemption arc. She told herself it would stabilize. It always did. But the audit she'd been praying wouldn't happen, had. And the report that came from it wasn't just damning. It was devastating. A quiet, 84-page bombshell, commissioned by one man. The one she had once laughed at over rooftop wine and mock flirtations. The one she'd humiliated in public for a few cheap laughs and a few raised eyebrows. The audit traced everything. Her promotion. Her proximity to Halvorsen. The private dinners billed to consulting. Her so-called work husband and his approval record patterns. But more importantly, it traced money. Tied to her. Tied to perceived favoritism. Tied to valuation metrics that no longer held water. It wasn't just a PR disaster now. It was legal territory. And when the valuation tanked, sliced by nearly 40% in overnight projections, the investors didn't ask questions. They called lawyers. And then they called the board. At 4:01 a.m., the vote was logged. Suspend operations pending reorganization and fiduciary remediation. That was the official language. Unofficially, the company collapsed. The acquisition was dead. The clients were fleeing. The partners were lawyering up. And she was left in bed, lit only by the harsh blue of her phone screen, wearing a threadbare college sweatshirt and trembling like someone had just broken into her house. She scrolled through the calls, through the unread texts, through the internal memo someone had accidentally sent to her still-active inbox. The stakeholder clause triggered a systemic review of all HR elevation paths over the past 5 quarters. Her name appears repeatedly. The board will want a clean decoupling. She didn't know what clean decoupling meant in legalese, but her gut translated it fast enough. A name erasure. A silence campaign. A purging. And him? He wasn't here. Wasn't on the line. Wasn't even mentioned anymore. Because he didn't need to be. He was already in another city. At another table. Meeting with new partners. Fresh deal. New firm. Different logo. Smiling. Calm. Not angry. Not vindictive. Just done. Her face wouldn't come up in his conversations anymore. Her voice wouldn't echo in his memory. She hadn't just lost the company. She hadn't just lost the house, the car, the circle of friends. She'd lost her role in the narrative. She wasn't the villain, wasn't the victim. She was just gone. An afterthought in a footnote of a clause she never read. 128 missed calls. And not a single one that could save her.